Hello, everyone, and welcome to our second lecture for holistic health. So, we have lots of things to explore. It's a very dry one this week because it's all our documentation, but it's still interesting because it underpins a lot of the things that you are doing in other courses, and it is something that we need to get a really good foundation of as we progress through the rest of your course. So, our first thing is I'd like to begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples that may be listening and watching today. This artwork is from an artist called Susie Botcha, and the painting name is Karajanara. So she is based in Balgo Hills, which is a remote community about 200 kilometres west of the Northern Territory. And you often get to it by going up to Broome and then getting on a little plane and flying 3 and a bit hours into the desert. So it's on the edges of the Tanami and the Great Sandy Deserts. The Aboriginal art from Balgo, it represents the culture and stories drawn from the 9 tribal groups who live in this remote community. So, lovely, wonderful composition within it. So, our lecture plan for today. We're looking at ASEQA, the EYLF, and AITSL. Remember, I said last week we were just doing the titles of them. This week we're looking at it in more detail. So, first of all, summary of who is ASEQA. The Australian Children's Education and Care Quality Authority. It's the independent national authority that assists governments in making sure that our national quality framework for children's education and care is implemented and monitored in different ways. So ASEQA works with the Australian and the state and the territory governments because what they do is they implement any changes that are going to be a great benefit for children from birth to 13 years of age. They then monitor and promote the consistent application of our care services law across all states and territories. They support the children's educational and care sector to improve the quality outcomes. And ASEQA is independent. It's based in Sydney, but it has a governing board that is nominated by each state and territory and Commonwealth. And so the board is accountable to the education ministers. So it has an intersection between the Department of Communities and the Department of Education. So then we have, as part of what ASEQA has as part of their remit, the National Quality Framework provides a national approach to the regulation, assessment and quality improvement for early childhood education and care and outside school hours care services all the way across Australia. So it introduced a new quality standard in 2012 that would improve education and care for long daycares, family daycares, preschool and kindergarten, and outside school hours care, so like your OSH centres and so on. So the NQF includes our national law and national regulations. It includes our national quality standards, which is what we're going to be doing a lot of. It includes the assessment and quality rating process, which of course is based on the national quality standards, and it has our national learning frameworks. So what we know is that some of the things that come out of this are our educated to child ratios. It makes sure that we are all working with the right skills and qualifications, and it's making sure that we have some really good learning frameworks that underpin everything. So our next one is our EYLF. So in December 2007, the Council of Australian Governments agreed that Australian and state territory governments, they'd work together to create a national quality agenda. And a key element of that was the development of the early years learning framework. The original one was reviewed in 2022, so the screenshots and documentation that we will be exploring and looking at are all from the new one. Until 2024, we will have the old and the new running alongside each other, but I thought that given you will be graduating with the new one being in place, it would be better to do more of our work around the new EYLF. So you may find different tutors and lecturers will have different reasons for choosing and keeping you within the older one. There's some comparing and contrasting that we might do as we move along, but for now I thought let's explore the new one in more detail. So when we look at our EYLF, we have around the outside our really core elements of it, where we've got our becoming, being and belonging. Sitting in the centre is the acknowledgement of all the children's development and learning, and then we have our learning outcomes, our core principles and our core practices. So our EYLF main outcomes, the changes that were made included having more emphasis on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives. We're moving away from cultural competence to cultural responsiveness. We included the planning cycle. There's a lot more around assessment and evaluation. There's some ideas around sustainability and collaborative leadership, and those changes are reflected in all of those three elements of the principles, the practices, and the learning outcomes. So again, our belonging, being and becoming, they sit over the top or around the outside of it. Our core principles are that we have secure, respectful and reciprocal relationships. We have core partnerships. We respect diversity. We have appropriate Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives. We have equity, inclusion and high expectations. We have inbuilt sustainability. We've got critical reflection and ongoing professional learning, and that we have collaborative leadership and teamwork. That then is put into these practices that we want to see within our centres, where we have holistic, integrated and interconnected approaches. We're responsive to children. We use play-based learning and intentionality. That's a new part that's been added in. We choose to set up our learning environments in the best way possible. We are culturally responsive. We have a continuity of learning and transitions, and we have assessment and evaluation that takes into account learning, development and well-being. Our learning outcomes haven't changed that much. So the learning outcomes are children have a strong sense of identity, they're connected and contribute to their world, they have a strong sense of well-being, and the children are confident and involved learners, and the children are effective communicators. So those core learning outcomes haven't changed. Some of our practices have morphed and moved, and our principles have changed a little as well. So now let's go back to our ASEQA. So with our ASEQA, we have our 7 core quality outcomes. With those, you are then having the ratings that go through them. So you might have a rating that is significant improvement is required. You don't want to have that, do you? Then you have working towards the national quality standards. So it means that some areas have been identified as not meeting expectations. Meeting national quality standards, excellent. Exceeding national quality standards is that you must be exceeding in at least 4 of the 7 quality areas, and it means you also can't have any that need significant improvement either. And excellent means that your service promotes exceptional education and care, and that rating can only be awarded by ASEQA. Okay, they may choose to apply if they receive exceeding. So then it's not just the people who come out and do the original review to ask for excellent. You must have everything rated at exceeding and then apply for it, and then you will have other people that will come out and do the assessment on it. As part of what we're doing in this course, we're exploring a couple of these in great detail, because this course is all focused on making sure that you understand the rules and regulations and the way that you implement those in a childcare setting. So when we're looking at a childcare setting, we've got the laws that govern things, but we're looking at it from the point of view of what are our quality standards and what do they look like in practice, and what do we need to do when we are in an early learning centre, in a childcare setting, in a school-based setting that is very much focused on possibly our pre-kindies or our kindies. It's not looking at the school-based setting that would be in a year 1 or a 2. It's looking at settings which are more in a childcare setting. So let's look at our first one that we have in more detail. So quality area 2, children's health and safety. So it's divided into the two aspects of children's health and children's safety. So children's health, that each child's health and physical activity is supported and promoted, and in safety, that each child is protected. Now, what we then do is ASEQA has broken that down into a number of elements within that standard. So we have the two core parts of the standard, the health, the safety, and then each of the elements is under health, we have well-being and comfort. So it means that we meet each child's need for sleep, rest, and relaxation. Under our health practices and procedures, it means that we have put in place appropriate management and hygiene practices to ensure effective illness and injury management. So we've got the right policies for all of the things around our health practices. And over the next few weeks, we'll be looking at those in a lot more detail. Our element 2.1.3 is healthy lifestyle. That looks at the relationship between healthy eating and physical activity and how they are promoted and appropriate for each child. So more than just the nutrition, but actually making sure that we've got that combination of it and how it's done within the centre. Now, under the safety part, our first element is supervision. So what we're doing is making sure that we meet, first of all, our ratios, but also that reasonable precautions and adequate supervision, so that's where our ratios come in, ensure children are protected from harm and hazard. So we have to think about our environments that we set up and who is supervising and ensuring those environments are appropriate and who is making sure that the children are using the environments in an appropriate manner. So we're making sure that we are protecting the children from harm and hazard. Our next part is incident and emergency management. So we have plans in place and we know what the health department says. We know when we need to reach out to different authorities. We have practiced and implemented all the policies for any child who may have an illness, ongoing illness, who may have an allergy of some sort that we need to take into account. We've put in place those plans for that. And there's a big list of them when you look at quality area 2 that we need to make sure that we have in a centre. Now, under element 2.2.3, which is our child protection, we're making sure that all of the management, the educators, and all of the general staff are all aware of their roles and responsibilities to identify and respond to every child at risk of abuse or neglect. So when you go into a centre, if you are doing volunteer work, if you are on prac, if you are working there, you will need to make sure you understand, first of all, how to identify, and secondly, how to respond. Because we have mandatory reporting put in place for schools, and you'll have a level of mandatory reporting that will be put in place for child protection as well. So we need to be aware of when we have to identify and what we do to respond. It's not enough to just say, oh, I'm a bit worried about them. We actually have to do something about it. So when it comes to quality area 2, there's quite a number of resources that are available. So one of the things that were listed on the website is looking at your risk assessment and your management cycle. So getting every centre to really think, what are the potential things that could go on and what would you do to mitigate that risk? So you're looking at a hazard, could be anything that could cause harm. And then a risk is where you're not really sure what's potentially going to happen, and it could be a positive or a negative. So you're identifying the potential hazard, you're assessing it, you're managing it, you're evaluating it and reviewing it, and you're documenting the process. So you should have a variety of risk assessments for lots of things that are going on in your centre. Sometimes centres have areas that they might walk certain children to. They might have a big park across the road or something like that. That would require a risk assessment. You may have guest speakers come in every so often. You may have a therapy dog that may come and visit. All of those require a risk assessment of some sort. And you think about, how do you determine the risk of potential harm? You ask those 4 questions. How likely is it to happen? How often might it happen? How serious could be the outcome? And what could the positive outcomes be? So a risk assessment is not saying that you wouldn't have a therapy dog come to visit. It's saying, what are those first 3 things and what could be the positive outcome? And that's where you would do the balance. So always keep in mind, this is why sometimes people go, oh, we can't do that because of this reason. It's not that they're being obstructive or anything like that. It's that when they did their risk assessment, it actually didn't balance. And they were like, nope, we can't do that. There are too many potential issues in some way. So then we think about with our other resources, when you are thinking about supervision. So what are your factors that you are thinking about? How many children? What are the ages and the abilities? So in our tutorial, we're going to look at the ratios that we need to have of the different qualifications of educators when we're at different ages and so on. So it's important we know if a room is set up a certain way for certain age groups, when do we move the children from one room to the other, and how many adults with appropriate qualifications need to be in those rooms depending on the number of children. So which part of the environment are the children using? What is the visibility? What are the possible hazards and risks? What experience is each child currently participating in? Are the educators knowledgeable? What's the level of experience and skill that they have in implementing the learning experiences? How many educators are available to actively participate? So if you use the ratios in the manner to which they are intended, it's not that you have this many people within the centre, it's that you must have the appropriate people on the floor with the children, not sitting out the back doing paperwork, not doing working with the kitchen staff to serve or anything like that. It's people with the children. So is the educator able to respond to an incident without putting other children at risk? If you have the right ratios, absolutely. But if you don't, or you don't have the environment set up appropriately for things like being able to see what's going on and so on for the visibility and accessibility, then that's where you get into problems. So looking at another one of the resources. So this gives a risk assessment and management tool for children over 5. So you identify it, you assess it, you manage it, you evaluate and review. What are we doing? What do we need to use? Could someone's well-being change, and how? And that could be a positive. Have we done this before? What happened? What could happen now? And what should we change to make it safe? Do we need some help? How did everything go? Did anyone get hurt? What could we do differently? So those are all things that we put in place. The first one, the one before we showed, was for our younger children. This one is for our children over 5. So this one is for our younger ones who are under 5. So how do we make it safer? What might we be doing? How might someone get hurt? What happened? What should we do next time to make it safer? So this is why you may find that some centres have very, really easy play equipment because they've had a number of incidences with their play equipment. So now they're a bit hesitant to use some of the more risky play. Whereas other centres, they have put in place the right processes and supervision and so on. So these are all for our health and safety quality area 2. Let's look at quality area 3. This is looking at our physical environment. You can see how the two relate to one another. So we've got 2 aspects of our physical environment. The first one is the design of our environment, and the second one is the way that that environment is used. So when we're looking at the design, we make sure it's fit for purpose. So that's why you'll find a lot of our childcare settings now are purpose-built. They used to be in a small house. They would be repurposed in some form. I'm finding now that they're actually being built from the ground up, because therefore they're making sure that they meet all of the requirements from the get-go. Secondly, that there is upkeep. So the premises, the furniture, and all the equipment must be safe, clean, and well maintained. So you should have a roster for doing the cleaning. There should be a way that you make sure that everything is maintained. So you will have a handy person who will come in and help to do all of those things. In our use, you make sure that the service environment is inclusive for every child, the way that we promote competence and support exploration and play-based learning. So in the tute, we're going to look at how this relates to the EYLF, with our play-based learning being one of those elements. So an inclusive environment means that you have an outdoor and your indoor spaces are all organised and adapted to support every child's participation to ensure every child can engage in a quality experience. You don't have a giant big step that if a child comes in and is wearing calipers and needs to use crutches, that they can't navigate the stairs. If you have a child who has a wheelchair that they can't access. If you have a child with a movement issue of some sort, that we make sure everything allows for access for every child. Our next bit is a massive one, that we have resources to support play-based learning. So we should have resources, materials, and equipment that have lots and lots of different uses and enable every child to engage in play-based learning. So we need to make sure that we have lots of hands-on materials, lots of resources that can be rotated in and out in different ways. And in our third element under use, that everything should be environmentally responsible, meaning that we're not being wasteful. We're thinking about what we do with our waste. We're not using too many consumable materials irresponsibly. We're making sure that we are caring for our environment and helping the children to care for the environment as well. So then our next one that we are looking at as part of this course that builds in around everything we do is the governance and leadership. So again, two core areas, governance and the leadership part. Now, governance is making sure that we are supporting the operation of the quality service. So we've got service philosophy and purpose, and we should have statements guiding that. Most of the centres will have that somewhere on their website. We've got management systems in place to manage the risk and make sure that we can operate a good service. And that's where you should have lots of processes, lots of policies, lots of things that just happen. You've got roles and responsibilities that are clearly defined, and so everyone knows who they go to if there's a problem. They are very clear about who answers to this, who's ensuring the efficient operation of the service. Then within our leadership, we're looking at the idea of self-assessment and quality improvement processes to ensure that they are consistently able to meet at least minimum expectations, preferably exceeding expectations. That we have a good educational leader in every centre that is supported and leads the development and implementation of the educational program together with the assessment and planning cycle. So we're making sure that we are linking everything through and that we are developing effective professionals so that we're making sure we have professional learning available for all of the people who work at the centre to make sure they are able to keep up with what's going on and to make sure that they are able to be reactive and responsive to things rather than just doing everything that they've always done. So our ASEQA quality areas of 2, 3, and 7 are the main ones that we're tackling in this course. You will, of course, be looking at some of the others as well, but they're our main ones that we'll be going through. Now, in EITSL, your EITSL standards are for your teaching and school leadership. So we have 7 core standards. They're divided into graduate, proficient, highly accomplished, and lead. Teacher standards have 7 of them. So you probably would have had these, those of you that have already been into a school of some sort, this is what you would have been assessed against. So with your EITSL standards, you have professional knowledge, and under that, knowing the students and how they learn, knowing the content and how to teach it. Under professional practice, you've got 3 standards: planning for and implementing effective teaching and learning, creating and maintaining supportive and safe learning environments, how we assess, provide feedback and report on student learning. And under professional engagement, we have how we engage in professional learning, engage professionally with colleagues, parents, carers, and the community. The 2 that we are looking at in this course are Standard 2, how we know the content and how to teach it, and Standard 4, how we create and maintain supportive and safe environments. So if we unpack those, Standard 2 has a number of elements to it. We've got our content and teaching strategies. We've got our content selection and organisation, our curriculum assessment and reporting. Can you see all the links between them all now? How we understand and respect Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to promote reconciliation between Indigenous and non-Indigenous, our literacy and numeracy strategies, and ICT. So all of those form Standard 2. These are the graduate level ones. Then Standard 4 is how we create and maintain supportive and safe environments. So we've got 5 different elements for that. We've got how we support student participation, how we manage the classroom activities, so that's related back to our keeping a safe environment, how we manage challenging behaviour, which is ever increasing in all facets of school and care, how we maintain student safety, meeting all our curriculum and legislative requirements, including, of course, our mandatory reporting, how we demonstrate and use ICT safely, responsibly, and ethically. So again, our ethical use of ICT in learning and teaching. So there are 2 standards that we do a lot of throughout this course, and they're core ones when you're working in the school environment. So they're our big picture things about our ASEQA, our EYLF, and our EITSL that we're looking at. I just want to introduce you into our next idea that we will start to explore. We will touch on it in the tutorial this week, but we will explore it in great detail in week 3. So we're looking at our idea of our care routines. And care routines are part of your assignment that you are doing for your website that you are building. And our care routines that we have are things like our nappy changing or toileting. We've got transitions, so transitions from home to school, from inside to outside, transitions, even little ones, from, our sleeping time into awake time and so on. We've got our feeding, our nursing or eating that we have as our care routines. We've got our exercising and physical movement. We've got our skincare and body hygiene. We've got things like our hand washing routines and our oral hygiene, all of our taking care of our teeth and so on. So depending on the centre, some of those will be done beautifully and have amazing routines for them. And others you'll go, okay. So we're going to explore that in a lot more detail over subsequent weeks. We're going to touch on it in the tute, but then go into it in more depth in weeks 3 and 4. So a quick summary. ASEQA has our national quality standards attached to it. Our EYLF is very much based around the being, becoming and belonging documents, and it governs how we want to plan and build our teaching and learning environments in our early years. A CEQA is something that is assessed. Our EYLF is something that we assume is being done. Our AITSL standards are our teacher standards for educators, and they are applied at 4 different levels. At your graduate level, your proficient, your leading, I've missed one. There's one other one. And then our care routines are how we put into practice our NQS and our EYLF. So that's why we need to have an understanding of our quality standards, an understanding of our EYLF, an understanding of our expectations of being an educator, and then how that translates into what we do with the children. So this week in our tutorial, we're going to be really exploring our documents and standards. We're going to be looking at the resources that are available for each of our NQS standards, and we're going to be unpacking the EYLF in a little bit more detail. So I'll see what you already know and what we need to know about each of those documents, because they underpin a lot of the things that we do in the early years. So I will see you all at the tutorial. Have an amazing week until I see you on Tuesday. Thanks, everyone.